Hi, good evening to all of you. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone here today for the first legal town hall series, which is focused on the manufacturing sector in India and how we expect the manufacturing sector to adapt in a post-COVID world. Before I jump to the event, I want to place a heartfelt thanks to all the frontline COVID warriors who've been keeping the country safe while we're able to work within the confines of our homes. My name is Rajesh Sivaswamy, and I'm a senior partner with Stubb and Kasiva Advocates. I will be your moderator today. My background lies in transactional corporate matters, M&A, and private equity. The timing of this event coincides with a staggered opening of the economy in phases, with the manufacturing activity likely to kick off even before we've had a handle on the epidemic. To discuss this and more, we have with us a distinguished panel of guests representing the manufacturing industry. Before I introduce them to you, I want to go through a few housekeeping items and share the format in which we will be conducting this session. The entire session will be 1 hour in duration. We have kept an extra 30 minutes of buffer if needed, with the first 30 to 40 minutes spark for discussion with the panel, after which I will be throwing the floor open for questions. I will encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A box appearing on your screens now. Once the discussion with the panelists is complete, we will open the floor for questions for about 30 odd minutes. Please use the raise hand icon on Zoom and we will unmute your lines one by one and you can ask your questions live through audio. You're requested to identify yourself and please stick to the questions that you raised and posted. Let me now proceed to introduce our panel here. Moving in alphabetical order, we have Ashish, Nair. Ashish is the head legal of Arvind Limited. He has a diverse experience in consumer essentials and has been part of large Indian conglomerates, including Adani Wilmar, where he headed legal, and Nirma. Welcome, Ashish. Also joining us is Ajai Kumar Jain, who is a senior VP and general counsel with Godrej and Boyce, with more than 32 years of industry experience. His domain expertise spans across industries, and he has been part of several well-known corporate names, including Siemens, Monsanto, and Lafarge. Welcome, Ajay. Next, we have Dev Bajpai, Executive Director, Legal and Corporate Affairs HUL, and VP Legal for South Asia, Unilever. He has over 30 years of experience across industries, including automotive, FMCG, hospitality, and private equity. He has been part of various industry committees, including CII and FICCI, and has represented the industry before several parliamentary committees. Welcome, Dev. Moving on to our last speaker, we have Nitin Mittal. Nitin is the General Counsel from Signify Innovations, formerly Philips Lighting. Nitin's rich experience of over 17 years spans legal, compliance, secretarial, governance, and risk management. Welcome, Nitin. Unfortunately, we don't have one of our speakers who was supposed to join us. Vikram Munje was supposed to join us. He is the General Counsel of Kalyani Group. He's not been able to join for personal reasons, and he has indicated that he will try and join us. Hopefully, you should see him on your screens before we conclude this event. Without any further ado, let me dive straight in and kick off this webinar. I think most of our audience has had a substantive discussion, I think opportunity to discuss about force majeure clauses with a number of webinars that are ongoing. But I think a lot of them have been asking us the practical insights on how corporates have really used force majeure. And I'm requesting Nitin to kindly share his views in terms of how force majeure has been really used from a practical scenario. Over to you, Nitin.
Yeah, thanks, Rajesh. I think first and foremost, I would like to take this opportunity to express gratitude for all the health workers, doctors, sanitation workers, and everybody who's working in these tough times to service everybody around us. COVID-19, I think, was something which nobody could anticipate or predict. Hence, it is important for all stakeholders to exercise patience, fairness, and empathy at this point of time. To see the situation, it has to be seen from two perspectives. I think both from a legal side, but also from an equitable side. The key ingredient being unpredictability of this event and also the test of obviousness. In times of these crises, I think it's important to give support and also extend leadership to all the stakeholders. From a legal perspective, just to touch upon, India, as everybody knows, is a common law country, and the terms of contract and judicial precedent play a key role in recognizing and enforcing rights. Most of the FM or force majeure clauses do not have strictly pandemics, as nobody could have anticipated it. And that would have enabled you to excuse performance if that clause was there in your contract. But of course, it is subject to interpretation. As an organization, if you see it from an organization perspective, we are wearing actually two hats. When we are receiving notices from the aggrieved side, which is to be seen from an equitable perspective, but also when we are invoking notices from the legal side. So both have different perspectives and solutions. As an organization, we are the leader in lighting, and we interface with different stakeholders, whether it is the customer, whether it is the supplier, whether it is, of course, the landlords, which are right now the main talking point in all the news items that you see. But we recognize that this event is temporary, it's not permanent. So you need to see it from a permanent perspective, from a long-term perspective. So if you see it from a customer perspective, we thought that instead of seeing it totally from a legal perspective, I think the first and foremost is to assuage the customer concerns on delivery of product or performance of services. So we embarked upon a communication strategy to reach out to our customers, to express them that, in spite of COVID, we will try our best to deliver the products, perform the services. But of course, the COVID situation may prevent us fully from doing it. So I think that strategy of being transparent and fair to our customers is very important, but at the same time expressing the problems that we are facing. Similarly, from a supplier side also, I think our suppliers are our partners, and it is important to partner not only in good times, but also in bad times. So we had that similar strategy with our suppliers. From a landlord perspective, of course, people view it that lockdown is a force majeure situation. You cannot use your offices, and so force majeure can be invoked. But if you see the force majeure clauses in all the leases, most of the time pandemics are not mentioned. So you'll have to rely on Section 56 or other judicial interpretations. But I think you have to see it from a long-term perspective, because leases, you are there for long-term. So case to case, we decided, for example, we took a new office just 2 months back. Now, if you have taken a new office in a prime place and invoking the force majeure immediately and not paying rent, I think in a prime place may also give right to the other party for breach of contract and probably termination, and that you would not want. So I think these instances we saw on case to case and decided and negotiated with the landlord. Some of these things that we thought of, whether we can waive the lease rentals, whether we can stagger the lease rentals, whether we can pay in installments. So some of the landlords are under discussion, and some may agree also. So I think that strategy of balancing legality and equality is very important, and that is what we exercise.
Thank you, Nitin. I think that was very well put. I think balancing, I think is the key takeaway there. And with that, I think I'll take the view from Ashish as well, because he lives in the part of the world coming in from our Prime Minister, from Ahmedabad, joining in. So I'm curious to know how he's looking at force majeure and how it's going to play out in the industry.
Yeah, well, thank you. See, I am representing a labor-intensive industry. So where we are dealing with large laborers, then we have suppliers also. So of course, with labor we have to deal in a different manner. But with suppliers, when I talk about the utility providers, the electricity supply companies, so where we are buying from both from DISCOMs and also from these private players. So in those matters, how will we invoke the force majeure? Can I invoke because there are large scale order cancellations. So I won't be able to continue with the same manner I have been continuing earlier. So there will be reduced production. So using the force majeure in such a situation is one of the key issues which we are facing. So I think, in my personal view, I think till the time the operations are normalized, we can keep on extending the force major. So by that means buying the quantity of power as I have committed. So second, the most important thing, all of us have issued these notices, but at the same time, we are also giving response to those notices. Somebody accepting our force majeure notice, somebody raising challenges. So like it's not acceptable to us. So it is equally important that we have to reply to those notices and take those matters into a logical conclusion so that our say is prevailed. And most important thing, we are into business, so of course we have to see these people are our stakeholders for future business also. So it is my personal view, we need to speak to them, try to exploit if there any scope for renegotiation of this agreement. So I think that is the way we can continue with doing business. And of course, for breach of contract, the remedy lies either in arbitration or in the civil court, and we all know how much time the civil courts will take for resolving the dispute. So, talking from the industry perspective, I think it is always advisable to renegotiate agreements as far as possible. When there is no possibility, of course, use the force majeure and go on.
Thank you, Ashish. I think that is very well put. I see a lot of similarities in both of your thoughts, and I think everybody is encouraged to the extent that things are amicably sorted. And I think we're looking at the economy trying to be open up, and you're seeing a lot of central government notifications and state government notifications. And I know the manufacturing sector has been given priority. So my question to you, Dave, if you can take that, is the challenges that you see in terms of the guidance from the center, the state, and the municipal corporations when it comes to the actual opening of the businesses. I think they are very early days, and some kind of clarity would, I think, be needed as we move forward on this.
Thank you, Rajesh, and good evening, everyone, to this conversation. We are indeed living in unprecedented times that have thrown up unprecedented challenges, and all stakeholders have to come together to find solutions to many of the challenges that we face. You're right, the manufacturing sector has been prioritized, and within the manufacturing sector that deals with essential goods and groceries, to which we belong, is indeed prioritized. Every lockdown, as we speak now, we are going through lockdown 3.0, and every lockdown has thrown up new challenges. When we had the first lockdown from 25th of March, we had some basic problems, basic challenges in terms of what is essential, what is not. There was a lot of confusion from the orders that came from the Ministry of Home Affairs and the corresponding notifications that got passed at the state level, primarily because essential goods and essential commodities were being interchangeably used. And essential commodities, as you all know, is a legal term under the Essential Commodities Act. And we did face this issue on the ground, where we were told that you can only do essential commodities and not essential goods in some of the states. Well, this was sorted out within a week or so. And given that the value chain around the groceries industry typically would have finished goods inventory of about 30 days or so, right from the factories to the distribution centers, and with the announcement of lockdown 1.0, a lot of panic buying happened, and within inventory worth about a week or 10 days got wiped out very soon. And given all of us know that in the first week there was almost negligible production, so this compounded the problem. And the biggest challenge that we had then was the supply challenge. How do we supply? Even though we would be essential, we would be FMCG, but we had problems of how do labor come in. Labor was not willing to come in some cases. Labor was not allowed to come. There were manpower restrictions. There were passes that were issued that which were limited, and there was all kind of transport issues, not getting trucks and things like that. I must add though that these remain for some time, but slowly with the passage of time, they have got resolved. Not fully though, we still have challenges, but given the regulations that kept coming up, the notifications that kept coming up with successive lockdowns, lockdown 2.0, some of it got clarified, and the states also responded. But even now, as we are in lockdown 3.0, there are issues around, the scope of containment zones. There isn't a consistent policy. I quite understand it is difficult. This has to be necessarily nuanced to local administration, to local situation. But there could be opportunities where, these issues like containment zones, interstate movement of labor, that's still a big issue. We've got many of our factories which are in Dadra, Nagar Haveli, and we have workers coming from Gujarat, and there are restrictions on moving workers from Gujarat into those. Or in Pondicherry and people coming from Tamil Nadu, we have problems of those as well. So things like containment zones, things like interstate movement of people, these can be looked at. These are challenges which still exist. But I should, at the same breath, compliment the government for the speed with which they have come out with orders, and also the district administration and the state governments, that they have picked up those and come out with their own notifications with great speed. That has really helped in bringing about clarity.
I agree with you. I think there are a lot of good points that you've made. And I think it is interesting times. Nobody's really seen these kind of times before. And the way I think the government has reacted, both the state and central governments, has been quite remarkable. But there have been some gaps, in terms of trying to get where we need to actually get. What's your view on it, Ajai? Ajay, you're on mute.
Rajesh, thank you for inviting me to this webinar. And though I agree, Dev has touched upon most of the point, but as per my experience, which I'm facing since last 50 days and which I'm contemplating every day in the call with the directors and the senior business leadership team, probably I will put all these challenges in 5 buckets actually. The first bucket is the workers. How to make them available for the manufacturing location, how to make them move, how to make arrangement for their stay and food, because every state government and every BMC having their own regulations actually. So that is the biggest challenge, how to maintain a distance when they are in the plant. Because I was reading somewhere that USA introduced some hooter sensor in their helmet of the workers. I don't know how much our Arogya Setu will work in India on that, take care of that social distancing arrangement. And there is a challenge that if you find even a one worker as infected, probably your 48 hours your plant will be get shut down or warehouse will get shut down. There's no clarity, but some of the state governments has clarified that the shutdown period will be only 48 hours. So this is the first challenge, and then you are actually working only with 50% strength or 25% strength. That is the biggest challenge, how you will actually maneuver on your manufacturing process. If you will take the case of car manufacturing, I don't know how you will actually make your production done with just with the 50% people on the floor. That is another big challenge actually. Or probably you need to incur some capital expenditure to reorganize your production pattern. So this is the first thing coming to my mind. The second thing, probably I'm thinking about logistic chain, which they've also touched upon. Where are the drivers? Trucks are stranded on the road. Where are the warehouses available, or warehouses available, the worker are not available to load or unload? That is another biggest challenge actually, which we are facing. Third point which coming to my mind is cost and cash inflow. Cost is the biggest impact here in this scenario whenever we will open actually. Everything will increase to the cost, the sanitization, the worker stay, the partial utilization of the plant capacity, because you are keeping the balanced plant capacity as idle, is increasing your cost. You are paying wages to the idle workers. So all those things is adding to your manufacturing cost, additional borrowing, additional interest cost. All those things are adding to your cost, and you are not sure actually when you will bill even actually if you are able to bill it, whether other party will sell it, whether he will able to pay you or he will retain your money for a longer period. So these are the next biggest challenge I can foresee. The second last point coming to my mind is demand. Where is the demand? Is that demand? Because we all understand the economic cycle. If you pay wages, then you create the purchasing power. When the almost as per CMI report, almost 12 crores job is already gone. Even if you will produce, will that going to get consumed in the market? Whether the shops are open, whether you are able to put it in the market. So what you will do with the manufacturing? So that is a much bigger challenge actually, how you will actually create the demand. And last one, but the most important one is statutory directive. No coordination between central government and state government and local municipal corporation. Like in Maharashtra, every day they're coming out with one notification and very next day they are reversing everything. They're taking a U-turn. All those things are creating a lot of confusion, flip-flop everywhere actually. They're granting permission, they're withdrawing the permission next day or same day evening actually. So this is the 5 bucket I believe is going to be the challenge for every manufacturer. What is my expectation? Probably may I have a minute actually? I just want to touch upon the expectation I have actually.
Sure, please go ahead.
So probably I think this suggestion has already been made to CIA or FICCI, somebody, that they have to make some arrangement for the labor camp kind of a situation where they can make their stay, their food and their medicine or medical facilities, because that is very important. Probably you have to run the trains again to bring them back from Bihar or Uttar Pradesh or Madhya Pradesh to the Bombay or Maharashtra or different location wherever you have a manufacturing facilities. The second expectation I have, this is not related directly to manufacturing, but I think there is a need to create an international fund actually. Globally, countries has to come together. They have to make a contribution and to create a fund which probably will study the future virus or future threat to the humanity or human being on this earth actually. I'm not talking about how to fight with the current COVID actually. For that, WHO is working already, though they miserably failed. And the third expectation I have from the government is to make cash available to the industry. Probably I will talk about that in my next question, that what are the options available. That's all from my side on this question.
I think those are very important points. I think a few points that you touched upon touched the raw nerve in terms of looking at the employer-employee challenges that are being faced, particularly a number of employers who are facing a lot of challenges in paying the employees. And while we can all empathize with both sides of the table, I think the MSMEs are the ones who are employing most of the labor, which is, I think, going to be very challenging if the situation continues. While this is a sub judice matter, I understand that it's being still deliberated. I want to check again with you, Ajai. What are your thoughts in terms of having a judicial intervention to cast some kind of responsibility on the government to provide some, maybe a bailout to companies and pay the employees or earning wages, specifically in the context that MSMEs contribute nearly 30% of India's GDP. What are your views on that?
So Rajesh, I think MSME is the backbone of the nation's economy. They not only contribute 30% in GDP, they contribute almost, I think, 22% in the employment and 48% in the export. It is very, very important for the government to build them again, to make them re-stand on their foot and they start manufacturing. So what I'm thinking, probably like it happened in Singapore, as I was talking other day, probably government has 2-3 choices here actually. Either they should make a package, announce that how much share they are ready to bear when the company is actually paying to their workers when they are not on the job. Probably that could be the first option. Like Singapore did in the 4th April, they made out very, very well. We cannot compare Singapore with India as a huge country, and that is a very tiny country. The second option probably available to the government, that they should work with the banks and the financial institution to work out some new product. Probably that will be exclusively available to the industry to just take care of the wages and the employee salary part. I am not talking the working capital loan was something similar at a concessional rate that will take care exclusively the wages part. The third option, which is very much required, I think, need of the hour, the government should defer the GST payment and the advance tax payment coming in near future. It is very much required. I know there is no business, so probably the tax implication or the incidence of GST and advance tax will be lower, but whatever it is, they have to defer it for 1 year's time minimum actually. That is the need of the hours. You cannot put all the pressure on the industry. Otherwise, they will just get pushed to the dirt actually. So that is very important.
I think those are the very relevant points, but given I think the size of the budget allocated to fight COVID, I personally feel there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Absolutely.
And I think we'll come to a point where the government has to do something because the industry will just not survive and we're going to see large scale bankruptcies if something doesn't really happen soon.
Very true, Rajesh, very true.
So, just to take this, the guidelines, we've all been looking at the MHA guidelines, which came out, 1.0, 2.0, and so on. And specifically with the manufacturing companies, you have something which is very unique to the manufacturing industry in terms of a continuous process, which has always been permitted throughout these restrictions. But while we've been advising a number of our clients, we've seen a lot of practical challenges that this has posed. So my question to you, Nitin, I think since you're present pan-India, I want to maybe share your views in terms of any challenges that you faced, and then really, is there any confusion in the interpretation of the word continuous process?
Yeah, no, thanks, Rajesh. I think when the lockdown was announced, there were few industries which were allowed to operate, and others were, to remain closed. And one of the industries which were allowed to operate were production units operating with continuous process. Now, this continuous process word is not defined anywhere. It is subject to interpretation. And as we know now, in the last 1.5 months, a lot of states have issued certain circulars, a lot of states have not. And in our experience, the ultimate authority, and you will be surprised to know, to interpret this word is not the Supreme Court, it is our humble neighborhood Tehsildar. Because finally, it is within his power to tell you whether your production process is actually a continuous process or not. And that is what we experienced in one of our plants in Gujarat. Now, just to touch upon what is actually the meaning of a continuous process in general parlance. So continuous process generally means when raw materials are being processed continuously in motion and they are undergoing some reactions, and there is a continuous process which is happening end to end, and there is no batch production. So for practical and economic reasons, these processes cannot be stopped because there will be a lot of cost and impact which will affect your economical cost of the product. And third feature is shutting down may actually result in a lot of wastage in the products, because a lot of these continuous process industries that you see, like boilers or blast furnaces, they are actually called continuous processes, and they operate 24 hours a day. So for example, in our industry, if you see, we have a glass furnace, and this glass furnace operates 24 hours because this glass furnace, as you know, operates on a temperature of around 1500 degrees centigrade. And if you stop this furnace, you need at least a few weeks to restart it, because that time takes to warm up that furnace. And you'll have to spend a couple of million euros to restart it. Now, when we went to the Tehsildar and the executive magistrate and other people that, this process we cannot stop, because if we stop it, this is the cost impact. People were not understanding the importance of this, our ask and our expectation. And ultimately, you'll be surprised to know, they allowed us, but they only told us you can only operate 2 people. A glass furnace with only 2 people, how can you practically operate? And after a lot of convincing and back and forth, and they finally gave us more people to work with, but still that was also in shortfall. So a lot of practical problems on the ground to operate these people, because people on the ground were actually approving these approvals for operating these factories, they don't actually understand the nuances of the technology or the practical issues or the business issues that the businesses are affecting. And in Gujarat specifically, I think they have formed a 7-member committee which comprises of labor inspector, factory inspector, executive magistrate, who are actually on a case-to-case basis approving these requests that you're putting in. So yeah, and so apart from that, other problems, of course, of manufacturing unit are there. They of course doing their best. I think it's a difficult time for everybody, but I would say that a little more trust and self-reliance on manufacturing units should be put, so that they can operate with much more freedom. And I think everybody is conscious of the responsibility on safeguarding their employees, their businesses. So I think little more self-accountability is required to the businesses on that front. Yeah.
Mr. Rajesh, you for 30 minutes, another 30 minutes to go. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me just throw, I think just a quick question to all the panelists. Since we're going through tough time, in terms of key takeaways, and given that the bulk of the employment is blue-collar workers in the manufacturing industry, what do you think are the most important imperatives that the manufacturing industry should get up to? Maybe you want to just lay out your expectations in terms of the expectation from the government. I think a lot of those items were discussed, but I think, if you could list it out in a point format, I think it would be useful for associations like the FICCI, who is also partnering on this platform, to channel this through to the government.
I think Rajesh, for manufacturing sector, especially now with China and people thinking from shifting manufacturing bases from China to India, it's important for us to be very cost competitive. And post-COVID, I think cost will increase. But of course, we need to have a safe working environment. We need to have risk mitigation plans to manage disruption in case of a COVID case in a factory. How do you maintain productivity when additional costs are there? As Ajai sir has mentioned, additional costs will arise because you have to maintain safety and security of people. How do you handle complex regulatory compliances in a cost-effective and an effective manner? These are some of the things that manufacturing will grapple. But I would also say there is an opportunity here. How do we use or how do we improve digitalization in our factories? How do we use robotics or artificial intelligence to manage these risks which are there? Third, I think is we need a very, very stringent or very, very far-reaching reforms on labor laws, because we need flexibility in managing our workforce. We need flexibility in paying our workforce. For example, currently, if you are given permission for 50%, you have to pay 100% wages. Now, how do you remain cost competitive in that scenario? So I think that flexibility is required. And then you need to take advantage of companies who are or opportunities which are shifting from China to India. Possibly we also have factories in China. We would want some of the production to come to our factory for some of the products. But how do you do that? You can only do that with simpler labor compliances, better infrastructure, licenses, being simplified, and some tax incentives, some stimulus to the manufacturing, because manufacturing is tough in India, I would say. My plant manager is going literally crazy managing the situation right now. So I think these are some of the thoughts that came to my mind.
I agree completely. What are your thoughts, Dev? I think you've been wanting to share some of your thoughts.
Yes, so Rajesh, for FMCG industry, since you asked what are the imperatives, I mean, what comes to my mind is we've articulated this publicly as a corporation. For us, people, their safety and security and well-being is most important. Secondly, supply lines. We have to ensure that henceforth the supplies are all open. There's great flexibility available. This is the time when some of the regulations can be eased in terms of labor laws, as Nitin also mentioned. So how do we ensure that our supplies are uninterrupted? And as a company that manufactures common man item on a day, which common man uses on a daily basis, we feel it's our responsibility to reach the consumer, especially during these times. And therefore, we would definitely focus a lot and seek cooperation from the government for unlocking end-to-end supplies, not just supplies for our factories, but for supplies that MSMEs and smaller units who supply raw materials to us, who supply packaging materials to us, or flavors or perfumes. Until those things are all open and enough flexibility is given in terms of working hours, in terms of shifts, 2-shift working, 12-hour shifts, it's going to become difficult. So second imperative is supply. Third imperative is demand. So the demand patterns have changed. People are focusing a lot more on cleaning products, on hygiene products. So, we need to respond to those. The fourth is on cost and cash. Costs have to be brought down. To the extent possible, costs have to be variabilized. And, cash is something which is, just now very little, and that has to be conserved. And the last imperative from our perspective is communities. Continue to serve the communities by supplying hand washers, by supplying sanitizers, cleaning products, hygiene products. Work with the communities. We've set up, we were one of the first companies to announce 100 crore donation towards communities. And we've set up isolation centers. We are supplying, relief kits to hospitals, to frontline workers. The ones who are saving the life of others need to be supplied soaps and sanitizers. And we have prioritized in terms of reaching out to hospitals across the country to supply these things to them. So, these are the imperatives. But coming back to what we need from the government and what FICCI can help us unlock, given that FICCI is collaborating with you on this, and we would definitely need FICCI's a very credible, as a platform to help us with the government, are things like labor unlocks. There has to be a situation where you permit pre-COVID situation. You let the companies operate until you find that companies are not complying with the social distancing norms. By all means, during this time, increase your inspections. See for yourself which are the companies that are complying with the social distancing and hygiene norms. Give them some more flexibility. That will encourage other companies to start complying with those norms and get flexibility. So you have to place trust first, and you have to give flexibility until that trust is, betrayed. That's the point I'm making. And we need flexibility in labor. We need flexibility in movement of people. I know it might seem counterintuitive to social distancing, but permitting e-com, for instance, can help the cause of social distancing. There'll be more and more people who would be buying on e-com because they would not want to go out to the markets. Now you need to give flexibility to e-com for all kinds of sale of products. So things like that, and it'll be great if FICCI can pick up some of these points, which is the collective output of not just 3 or 4 people here, but also of your listeners and those who are participating. We could have get great insights from them as well.
Absolutely. I think, Dave, those are very relevant points that you mentioned. But on the one side, you have there's a down in demand. There's no demand in the market. Plus the costs have gone up. You are having to pay your employees. So somewhere down the line, I think the government support is going to be imperative to help industry sustain. And Ajay, you've been nodding your head on some of those points that they've made. I'm interested to see what points that you have to share. I think together, all of us can make a useful contribution in cumulatively, collating our thoughts and sharing it with the FICCI and then to the government. Ultimately, I think if it percolates to the government, I think our job's done.
Sorry, Rajesh, I think I missed gist of your question. I think your voice is echoing.
My observation was really in terms of what do we need to do? What does the industry need to do? What does the government need to do? And how can we all come together as a unit to try and mitigate this? On the one side, we see that, news on companies moving out of China. And we're already seeing many of them going to different countries. They're not necessarily coming to India. So what do we need to do about our labor laws? What do we
Right.
need to do about a whole lot of other things? I think you got my point.
Right, Rajesh. I think as Nitin and Dev has touched upon that, I think those 4 codes on the labor and industrial reform are already pending since very long with the government. I think they should release them, make them enforceable and implemented as early as possible, because certainly industry need that kind of a flexibility. And so that is one, certainly very, very important. And secondly, as Dev touched upon, that we should get flexibility as a manufacturer. That you should allow us to ramp up our manufacturing capacity, not only with the 50%, probably 75% to 100%. And probably you should have a penalizing provision that if you're really violating any norms of sanitization or any norms of social distancing, then you can penalize us. But we have to go for a full-fledged production as early as possible. Parallelly, you start allowing opening the market wherever we are able to push our manufactured product and sell it, because we need to understand one very important thing on a global scenario. See, right now the whole international market is also in a very sunk mode, but as soon as the situation will ease off globally, everybody will jump to actually grab that export market. And believe me, the kind of regulation and the kind of process we have in India, it will take a lot of us time to actually to reach to that export market, and some other country, probably China, will actually grab that market and we leave behind. So we have to keep even that international scenario also in the mind, that how fast we can do that. So government should actually make flexibility in the legislation. They should make available about the cash, manufacturer or the large industrial house, and they should actually take care of the implementation or proper implementation of the regulation in their manufacturing site or warehouses, wherever they are. And then only we can go together and probably come out of from this economic slump. I can say it's not economic slump for the globally we are in recession. Actually, we'll come out very fast from that.
Thank you, Ajay. Ashish, do you have any thoughts to share on the same topic in terms of trying to put your thoughts together and then really trying to address this as an industry?
Yes, I think from this, since I belong to labor industry, so one of the major issues we will be facing is, paying our laborers, because we will be operating at a reduced capacity for a couple of months. So the FICCI and association should try to persuade the government to give some soft loans to these kind of industries. Then, of course, labor reforms, it will take time. So this is one of the main points which I want to emphasize. Like, they need to support financially to those industries who are struggling to cope up with this pandemic, because the export orders are cancelled. We have to manage large scale large quantity of workers, and there is a MHA order of 29 March, which is, in a way, there is a risk of prosecution if I do not pay, or even if I pay on the basis of the ID Act. So today, even I cannot pay on the basis of ID Act because there is a risk of prosecution by this 29 March order. So these are the issues, I think, which needs immediate attention by the government. These two issues.
Understood. I think those are very useful thoughts, by all our panelists, and I think the audience would agree, that the industry has to stand united and try to put up concrete thoughts in terms of trying to action and initiate the government to make some things resolvable by the, given the present situation, because it's going to get very difficult if we don't do something very soon. And with that, I think
one more thing, even the order, see, there is no clarity on the order itself, the 29th March order. So,
absolutely. I mean, there are several orders which there is not much clarity
I'm
on.
talking about a 29th March order, which says, you need to pay, either pay or face jail. So, if I look at the recital part, of course, it talks about the migrant laborers. But when I look at the operative part, it talks about, all laborers. So in fact, in Gujarat, this administration has started issuing notices, so shoppers notices threatening prosecution.
We've seen a few of those as well.
Yeah, to those contractors, I have come across those contractors who are not paying.
Mr. Rajesh, you for last 15 minutes. We have questions in the Q&A box, and
Let's open up, Akshay. Let's open up. Let's hear the audience. Let's take questions live.
Sure. Mr. Christopher Hayes, can you please ask your question?
Yeah, well, thanks, Rajesh. Thanks for this fantastic webinar, and thanks everybody for giving us a really good insight. I'm from UK India Business Council. And one of the questions that I had is that, I think, Rajesh, you touched on it slightly before. Obviously, we're trying to support UK businesses into India, and India is obviously trying to grab manufacturing businesses now through the China Fund and through stories this morning about creating land twice the size of Luxembourg. However, one of the biggest issues that our businesses continue to say through our Ease of Doing Business survey is that bureaucracy and taxation challenges still are a big challenge. So my question is, how do you think the government should seize potential opportunities to attract new manufacturers to India? And how could they support you by reducing bureaucracy and making your jobs easier?
Thank you, Chris. Just to give, I think, everybody some background, Chris represents the UKIBC, which is the United Kingdom's Business Council in India, and he's been instrumental in bringing in a lot of UK businesses into the country. And I think your question is relevant, Chris. I think we've always been in India. We've always had this chalta hai attitude. If you understand what that means, we make policies as we find fit, tuned to the opportune time. I think more than ever so, this is the time where the government has to get together, liberalize norms, help try and facilitate investment. I think that is the key takeaway here, because if the government doesn't realize this at this juncture, I think we are doomed, because we're looking at a scenario where companies want to come into India, and the government has to try and do everything it can to facilitate this. Happy to listen to the other panelists on this. Ajay, you want to say something?
So Rajesh, I agree with you. If we are believing there are a lot of news in the newspaper and media that European countries and other countries are looking India as a alternative hub, or probably a hub to replace from China to set up their manufacturing capabilities and or probably manufacturing facilities. I think that is a fantasy as of today. I don't think we should live in that fantasy, because that's not going to happen very soon. And as Christopher touched upon, we have a lot of issues on the bureaucracy side and rules and regulation. We still don't have any single window clearance kind of approach. And still, we Indians are getting so much time to get a single approval within India. So I think when a foreign company coming India and facing all those difficulties, this is really not creating a good image about India. So I think it will take a lot of time. I don't know, after coming out from current situation, which is itself is so much depressing and on everybody, on the government, on the industry, on the labor and the general public. I don't know how fast the government machinery will ready to accept the changes or adopt the new practices or open up themselves and probably facilitate the international investment. So this is, I think I don't have a ready answer, but this is a good point to debate, and we have an opportunity to grab it actually.
Can I just add to Ajay?
Please do.
Look, I am an eternal optimist, and I think that this is a great opportunity which the government will not let go. I think they are acutely conscious of the fact that India is being looked at as an alternative. And I don't think that the government will let this go. I fully appreciate what Ajay said. There are issues, there are challenges. When you want to set up shop in India, there are regulatory constraints. but I think this is a great opportunity in some ways for the bureaucracy and those who are in government to understand that if we don't take the opportunity now, we will miss big time, because this is a consequence of a global pandemic. Every country in some ways has got impacted. And if investors are looking at India, if India does not respond now, it will miss out. So my sense is that government is acutely conscious of it. And once we are through, or we are able to control the COVID crisis to a substantial extent, I think you will see that there are changes in our policies and they will become more investor friendly, and there will be clearances which will be given faster than it took time in the past.
Absolutely.
I will probably just put it in one line. Probably, I think internationally, every country is now on a level playing field, because everybody is facing the same problem, same issues. And I think I'm agree with Dave. Probably it's a great opportunity available to all countries, including India, or certainly the bureaucracy in India has to move in the right direction. We have a great opportunity.
Thank you. Let's take another live question.
Mr. Pramod Kumar Mahapatra, please ask your question. Mr. Pramod Kumar Mahapatra.
Pramod, I think you're on mute.
Mr. Pramod, can you please ask your question? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question. Thank you, Mr. Pramod. Mr. Arvind Chaurasia, can you please ask your question? Mr. Arvind Chaurasia. Mr. Ghanshyam Kaushik, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, sir.
Please go ahead.
Yes. Everybody is aware that the contract agreement which the industry has done with different dealers or their stakeholder difference, now there was no force majeure clause in the agreement. There is likely be a lot of litigation after the COVID is over and the industries are restarting. Whether government has any plan to solve it right now before the industry is opening, like Singapore or Australia, they have made a provision for not initiating any legal action for the 6 months. So I want to know from the panelists whether there is a solution beforehand, before opening the COVID.
Thanks, Ghanshyam. I think very quickly, before I share it with the panelists, I think there is already an initiative by the government to try and make sure that insolvencies don't really happen, and you will probably see a moratorium on filing of new cases at least for 6 months or so. I think the section 7, 8, 9 of the Act will stay suspended. That's insofar as insolvencies are concerned, but I don't think you would be able to apply the same logic for all other litigations that are going to be forthcoming from the crisis. Any of the panelists wants to jump in on this question? And
so in fact, India, in Singapore, they had enacted a very special law, which is the Temporary Provisions Act. And under that section 5, all agreements or understandings which are affected by COVID, the party affected had been granted some relief under that special law. Unfortunately, in India, we don't have that special law. And then you'll have to read section 56, which is the frustration clause in the Indian Contract Act. And if the contract probably differs some other provisions. So it's a matter of interpretation, it's a matter of litigation, and which is of course not giving a sense of comfort to a lot of people. So I think the idea, and of course what we also saw is to avoid litigation or to avoid going into the legal route, it's better to seek active discussions with all your stakeholders, come to a win-win situation, because ultimately everybody is affected. Now, if everybody is affected, how does everybody reach to a consensus and a win-win situation for all? So I think litigation or legal is not the correct way. Of course, as a legal person, I'm saying it. The correct way is to find a consensus, because everybody is in the same boat right now.
Correct.
So that is what my advice is.
Thanks, Nitin. Let's take another one.
Mr. Surinder Singhal, can you please ask your question? Mr. Surinder Singhal.
So I would request all the attendees to unmute and keep their systems ready.
Mr. Surinder Singhal, would you like to ask a question? Ms. Divya Uttaman, would you like to ask your question? Ms. Divya Uttaman, would you like to ask your question? Mr. Mahesh Sharma, please ask your question.
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, Mr. Mahesh Sharma, please go ahead.
Yeah. I have two questions, rather. Both are connected. My first question was whether in the prevailing circumstances when the government has passed the orders to prosecute if we don't pay to the ideal labor during these periods of March and April, but there is no provision of law. Can you please elucidate how they can prosecute the industry when there is no provision in the law? My second question is, there are various MOUs which we have executed with the trade unions, but now since the labor is sitting idle, so in those cases, even with 33% labor, are we bound to pay to the complete workforce all the benefits under the MOUs? These are two issues which I think I was concerned, and can you please elucidate?
Ashish, you want to take that?
The 29 March order, yes, it says you have to pay. But if you look at the recital of the order, it talks about migrant labor. I think it is a call to be taken only regular workmen are not covered. Then pay them as per ID Act. So you can pay under the ID Act, you can pay 50% plus applicable DA. You can pay under the ID Act. Then if there is any show cause notice, anything is coming, give reply or challenge it before the Supreme Court or the court. Fortunately, Supreme Court has not dealt with issues so far about the issue of prosecution because nobody has highlighted the issue of prosecution so far before the Supreme Court. So there is an opportunity to take the matter before the Supreme Court and say, see, I think last occasion there was a question by the Supreme Court that, so far there is no prosecution. So then why should we interfere? So we can at least say, see, now there is such a risk of prosecution, therefore please interfere. So I think if companies are seriously affected by cash flows, this call can be taken.
Thank you, Mr. Nair.
Yeah.
Mr. Rajesh, and to all the attendees, we're increasing the duration of the webinar for another 15 minutes because we have a lot of unaddressed questions. Mr. Amit Das, please ask your question now. Mr. Amit Das.
Yeah, hi, am I audible?
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Amit Das, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So what I wanted to ask is, this is not just something that is based on the manufacturing sector alone, but a lot of companies have been taking out additional pari passu charge creation so that, to generate more money before, so that they can deal with a situation such as this. Now, what I want to know is, in the long run, do you think this is going to cause any systemic issue to the general economy? Hello?
Yes, Mr. Rajesh, could you please address to the question?
You want to take that? Ajay?
I'm not able to hear the question actually. There is a lot of disturbance.
Mr. Amit Das, can you please repeat your question briefly and a bit louder, please? Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now? A little
yes,
clearer?
I can.
Yeah, okay. My question is that a lot of capital borrowings have been taking place through security creation, and in some cases it's happening through the creation of pari passu charges. Now,
Okay.
Is this something that is a healthy practice that is going to affect, or do you think it's going to have a drastic impact on the economy?
No, Amit, I didn't get your question. Probably, Rajesh, are you able to?
No, I'm sorry, I couldn't get you, Amit. I think your voice is breaking through in the middle.
So Rajesh,
I think if I may attempt, I think the question is that there is a lot of borrowing that is taking place and a lot of pari passu charges are being created on assets that may already be charged.
Right.
And is this a healthy practice? Now, while we are a no debts company, but what I can say is that, it is a business imperative. If you need to borrow and create security, firstly, if you have an existing charge holder, you'll have to take his or his consent to create a pari passu charge. But if the borrowing is essential for you, and you think that the person who's lending you is making it a condition to have a charge on an asset which is already charged. Normally, it doesn't happen that way. Until you get the permission of the existing charge holder, you will not be able to create the charge. But ultimately, everything gets determined by what the business need is.
Absolutely.
I think it's more a financial question. I think because if you over leverage your borrowings against the same asset, you'll of course be over leveraged, and you may face problem in future to pay that, because ultimately everything has to be linked to assets. So your debt equity ratio may just go up very significantly. So I think it's more a financial perspective that you need to look into this.
Thank you, Mr. Bajpai and Mr. Mittal. Mr. Jain Talwar, please ask your question. Mr. Jain Talwar.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
Mr. Talwar, please go ahead.
Okay. I have two questions and anyone can answer it. The first is that many companies took business interruption insurance. Have any of them have come of any use in this situation? Have any of you been able to claim, or the insurers have said, go take a hike?
No, in fact, Sujain, we have a business interruption insurance for our factory. And because of this COVID, there was some material losses. So of course, we are trying with our insurance company, because we are trying to say this is an unprecedented event. This is an act of God, due to which our production was hampered, and due to that our lines could not work during that period, a 10 to 15 day period, and because of that there are certain fixed costs that we need to recover. So we are trying that perspective, but I think it's a difficult route to take, especially because a lot of these insurances, if you want to take specifically this inclusion, it's very expensive also. But nevertheless, we are trying. It's difficult, but I would say still trying.
Thank you, Mr. Mittal.
Can I ask a second question? Or
sure, please go ahead, Mr. Talwar.
The second question is that I was at a webinar listening to the ICC on the new 2020 force majeure and hardship clause, which I thought was very well thought of, including giving 2 or 3 alternatives. Have any of you had a chance to use it in the past? There was one prior to 2020, and now in 2020 they have come out with a new one. So what I am finding is many clients are saying that is well drafted, caters to a lot of situations, and is quite fair in terms of the length and termination rights. So as if the contracts are to be renegotiated today or entered into, people are looking quite closely to borrow that clause as becoming the standard one for their companies. Have any of you had a chance to renegotiate, or that will happen post lockdown?
You want to take that, Dave?
No, Rajesh, I have not seen this clause actually, so I'm not aware about this. But yes, I am expecting a new law in India also on the force majeure. But if the ICC has already made a proposal, I think it's going to be certainly useful, but certainly going to be in future. And I think this kind of a situation is not faced by India or probably other countries also in past. So we may be using it in the future only. But I have not read those clauses actually.
Yeah. So in fact, I also have not read it, but we are in process of reviewing all our clauses, especially on leases or on supply chain or with customers. In fact, for all new proposals that we are having with customers, we are actually putting a sort of a COVID clause. It's not a force majeure clause, but a COVID clause, which states that in these times, because of COVID, you may face delay in deliveries or services, and we should not be accountable for delay due to that delay. So those clauses we are actually incorporating now in our contracts. So there is some thinking going on currently to revisit all our contracts to take care of this new situation. But of course, the ICC clause, we still have to see what exactly it brings to the table.
Thank you, Mr. Mittal. Ms.
So
Meghna
we-
Bhaskar. Ms.
Yeah, please.
Meghna Bhaskar, please ask a question.
Hi, good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. I'm from Flex, which is an electronics manufacturing company, and I understand all the sentiments and all the points that you've spoken about, and we're also facing the same. I just wanted to understand from an industry perspective, if while the matter is sub judice regarding the wages, which is in the Supreme Court, if the matter does not get heard on by the middle of this month, what is the plan of the industry with regard to the wages of employees who will not be coming to work owing to partial shutdown of operations?
Well, I can give you a theoretical answer, but since we have all of these general counsels who are handling this situation live, I think it's going to be very interesting to hear from them what they feel about it.
So, Ms. Bhaskar, situation is like this. Actually, the matter is sub judice, but is if not going to be get heard by middle of this month or probably end of this month, the existing circular of 29th March or whatever other notifications issued by the state government will continue to be in force, and you have to follow them, you have to obey them. That is the only situation today. And I don't think you are able to take any other decision in the current situation. And as far as the Disaster Management Act and everything, whatever notification they have issued, that we have to take care of the workers' wages and everything. So my personal view is DMRA Act is not authorized to pass any such regulation or take any such stand. They're supposed to take a stand only within that DMRA Act only. They cannot go beyond that. But this is my answer, that you continue to follow whatever stated in the current notification is in force.
Any thoughts on that, Nair? Because I think this is a very, if you look at the Q&A, a lot of questions only on employment, and really industries are trying to understand and grapple with what they need to do, because in the absence of a contrary notification from the government, one is only looking at litigation headed their way, no matter what they really decide. What's your take on it?
So look, there is a humanitarian side of it and there is a legal side of it. This is a pandemic of such proportion that no one could have imagined that it will have such consequences. Even though it started in China and we had some initial sense, we have a big Chinese business, but no one could have appreciated that its consequences would be of this kind. So my take on this one is that if the workers are coming to work, and government also has made it clear, if you look at many state advisories, the many state notifications are not really advisories. What they say is that if the workers are living in containment zones, then it should be deemed that they are on work and on duty. So first principle is don't terminate anyone during this period. Second is don't reduce their wages. Third is, if you look at the guidance from Ministry of Industries, Government of India, and Ministry of Labor, Government of India, it says that if the workers are in containment zone, they should be treated that they are on duty. At the converse to that is that if they are not in containment zone and they can come to work, they should be coming to work. So there, I think one would be right in taking a view that you can deduct wages, because you can't subsidize some workers for the rest. If some are coming to work, why can't the rest come to work unless they don't meet the condition of, unless they are in containment zone? So I think whether it is wages, whether it is contracts, I think as an industry, we have to be responsible. We shouldn't end up having a plethora of litigation after the pandemic. Like Nitin was saying, we should try and resolve issues by conversations, by talking to people, because everyone is impacted in some ways or the other. So that applies to contracts. It equally applies to wages of workers. And of course, again, like I said, we need to, take the good offices of FICCI and go to the government with some of these practical challenges and seek help from them as well.
Absolutely. Akshay, can we take the next question?
Sure. Mr. Mahesh Mehta, would you like to ask a question? Mr. Mahesh Mehta. Mr. Mahesh Sharma, would you like to ask a question? That's it, Rajesh. I think you can go through the Q&A box questions and conclude the webinar now.
Sure, thank you. I think one of the things that when I'm looking at the Q&A box, there's a lot of queries again on employment. People are looking at trying to get a solution to not really work. Let's hypothetically say that somebody is in a containment zone, and while we have opened up 33%, in the industry, but many people are not able to commute to work. So how do we practically address this kind of a situation? In Delhi, for example, we see that people are not able to cross the borders on certain days, and while industries have been asked to open up at 33%, people are not able to get to their workplace. How do we deal with that kind of a situation?
So Rajesh, if I can come in, I think we may be confusing issues. If you are in containment zone, you are not expected to go out. Because you are in containment zone, your factory is shut. You're not expected to come and work unless you get out of containment zone, right? And the 33% that you talk of is essentially for office. If in the last order that got passed, even manufacturing in red zones are permitted, provided you are not in the containment zone. So if you are in the red zone, and if you are not falling into a containment zone within the red zone, then you can manufacture. If you are in an industrial township, if you are in an industrial estate, or you are an SEZ or an EOU, or you're doing essential products, you can manufacture. The problem is when you come into containment zone, and that I think is the right policy, because you wouldn't want the infection to spread. My plea has been that define containment zone in a more realistic way and try to have some kind of consistency across the states on containment zone. While I completely appreciate that it has local nuances, but try and make it as consistent as it can get as far as containment zones are concerned. So my take is that on this question.
Sure. There's another question.
Rajesh, we have a live question request. Mr. Ankit Tripathi, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ankit. So I just wanted to ask my question in light of 29th March order, which specifically states that the employer would be responsible to make the payment for the wages for the period which are under lockdown. Now, when I say that period under lockdown, we have seen that various states have come up with notification and have granted permission for the industries to start. So while seeing that this is a partial lifting of lockdown with respect to the industries which is allowed to manufacture, can we say that the employers are only entitled to pay the laborers for the lockdown period only? But once the manufacturing starts or once the factory is operated, then in that case, the responsibility of the manufacturer will not be to pay the laborers if they do not report to work.
Yeah, so Rajesh, if you want me to go on that, I agree with Ankit. Wherever there is guidance, and firstly, let's understand that all the guidelines and order that are coming from the Ministry of Home very clearly say that states are well within their rights to put out stricter norms, and rightfully so, because states are closer to closer to the ground, and they understand what the situation insofar as infection is concerned is in their respective areas. So while not diluting the guidelines of Ministry of Home, the states are well within their rights to come out with stricter norms. Now, coming to Ankit's question on payment of wages, I think I repeat what I said earlier. If the state government has come out with a notification that says that workers should be coming to work, most of the notifications that I have seen talk about the fact that if the factory is in containment zone, or the person who works in the factory lives in containment zone, he will be still paid wages, which is understandable. But so conversely, although it doesn't expressly say so, conversely it would mean that if your factory is not in containment zone, and if you are not staying in containment zone, you need to go to work to get wages. And that's the point Ankit is also making. So Ankit, you will be right in dealing with this, where you say that if you come to work in a factory which is not in containment zone, you get your wages. But if you don't come to work, then don't expect wages, because there would be others who would be coming to work. You can't make a distinction between those who are coming to work and those who are not.
Mr. Varun Sharma, please ask your question. Mr. Varun Sharma. Mr. Varun Sharma. Mr. Sanju Ahuja, would you like to ask your question? Mr. Sanju Ahuja, would you like to ask a question? That's it, Rajesh.
Yeah. So there is also this, the various state governments are issuing passes, in terms of to the companies, whether it's employee passes or factory passes or, passes for opening up establishments. What's been your experience, again, going to Dave, because you have in Pan India, you are present, Nitin, you are present as well, and Ajai, you have presence throughout the country. So does Ashish. So how are you looking at it? I mean, has it been an easy process, or has it been a challenging process? Which states do you think are doing better than the other states?
It's been challenging. It's not been easy at all. As I said, initially the focus was a lot more on what is essential, what is not, but very quickly that got sorted out. But the next big challenge was to get passes for workers and for getting the transporters to move. And, we've kind of been working at 60%, 70% of the capacity. At many places, we have not been working at full capacity. And from a government perspective, yes, they want to ensure social distancing. So one of the things which we have been advocating, and I said this earlier in the conversation, that we should try and make a request to the local administration to come and inspect, see the norms of social distancing that the factories have, and if they are satisfied, they should give permission for everyone. Now, with the latest guideline of 1st May, which is effective from 4th May, it almost gives an impression that no passes are required. It doesn't really talk specifically about passes. But again, like I said, it leaves it to the state governments and district administration to make rules which they could put down restrictions in their wisdom which are required given the local situation. But passes have always been a challenge. They are continuing to be a challenge, and they will continue to be until you fully relax and go to pre-COVID days. And one way to do that is allow people at full capacity, and then like Ajay was also mentioning, see those companies and those factories which are working with full social distancing norms, let them continue. But those who are not doing that, regulate the permissions. Maybe give them limited permissions. But start with full capacity is what I would urge.
So Rajesh, I have a mixed experience across India. We have manufacturing facility, branches, warehouses, repairing center. And certainly in Bombay, it is a challenge to get the passes actually online. It's a big challenge. The system is jammed. The physical system is working much faster and much efficiently. If you go in southern India, the passes system is much easier. And as they've said, wherever the factories or manufacturing facilities are not in the red zone or the containment zone, then you don't need pass and the movement is very easy and free. But to my utter surprise, I have a very good experience like in the state of Bihar or Chhattisgarh or West Bengal. To some extent, my surprise that people, the bureaucracy is much more cooperative and they are much more upfront, and actually they are contacting themselves. Are you want to offload your truck or you want to open your warehouses? So we found that there are pockets like in Bihar or Chhattisgarh or in Mohali or in the near Haridwar. The government machinery is much more smoother and much more upfront, and they are offering and they are giving all kind of support for accessibility to the manufacturing site and to start running the production, because they believe that as soon as the manufacturing side will start working, probably they will have lesser problem because worker will be on job, they are getting wages, they feed their families. So I have mixed reaction across India, right from Kerala to Jammu.
Yeah, just to add to Ajay, our experience, just to give you an example, when the lockdown 1 happened and as we moved into lockdown 2, Assam was proving to be extremely difficult. But today we have got the maximum flexibility from Assam. So I think the governments are also learning. They are also changing their stance over a period of time. And I agree with Ajay on Bihar. It's been extremely very, very customer friendly, and we've had very good experience. And frankly, at every state, people are learning. It's an ever evolving situation. That's the other challenge of this pandemic. You find that things are moving ahead. Bureaucracy is cooperating, giving you all the flexibility, and suddenly there is an outbreak, and you can't really blame them if there is an outbreak. It just comes back. So it's an evolving situation that you're dealing with.
Absolutely.
Shameen Marwa, can you please ask your question?
Yeah, sir, good evening. It has been a really fruitful session. I would just want to know that what are your thoughts into this, that provided, let us consider that the government bails out some financial package for MSME sectors. So while handing out those packages, don't you think that they should consider what are the tax defaultness of the companies? Like the company, if they have defaulted in paying their taxes, they should be given a last preference. So by doing this, they will inculcate a habit into companies that if you pay taxes on time, you will get the right help from the government.
Shavin, you're assuming that there is a bailout in the offing, which is actually
provided, yes, if they do so.
Which is a positive spin. I think the nation wants to know whether there's a bailout in the offing. But yes, I think that's a good yardstick to understand whether people should be getting any bailouts at all. But again, it's anybody's take. It could be misused as well, with the two sides of the coin there.
Yes, I mean, and it's very difficult to implement actually. Probably, though I am talking about the deferment of the GST and advance tax, but you take a situation, suppose some company will pay the advance tax on time on 15 June. They will probably avail the benefit, and probably on the 15th September they miss out. Then how you will roll back the benefit already given to them? So it's very difficult to implement. Though you have a good thought, and I liked your probably positiveness about this actually. But if I believe if government able to sort out some basic issues, that will be welcomed.
Yeah, let's go for the next question.
Anand Sharan. Mr. Anand Sharan, can you please ask your question? Mr. Anand Sharan, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Okay. So my query was essentially in terms of the cash flow issues, because many of the credit that the businesses will be taking, it will be difficult to pay off in time since the entire chain will be affected by this. I mean, apart from, yes, getting a support from government loans and etc. subsidies, is there any other effective way which in practical terms that you are looking at to address these issues, to manage this credit management and cash flow, and how to balance it?
Nitin, you want to take that?
I think it's a very difficult question because ultimately, unless the customers at the ground level pay us, the retailers will not pay, the distributors will not pay, we will not get paid, we will not be able to pay our suppliers. So actually, it's the whole ecosystem which is disturbed. And there has to be some stimulus somewhere which has to come in. And somebody has to put money in the system because of the vacuum which has been created. So I really don't know how to manage this cash system. It will take some time to come into that regular rhythm or cadence which is required, so that everybody is having cash within the system.
Mr. Sandeep Sharma, could you please ask your question? Mr. Sandeep Sharma.
Hi. So what I want to ask is about the Indian economy. Where do you guys think the Indian economy in particular is heading? I know the worldwide situation, the economies worldwide are bad, but considering the number of unorganized sector, the amount of unorganized sector we have in India, and of course noting at the same time that we cannot survive without them because they are the ones who are really helping the manufacturing industry in a good way. So do you think that the Indian economy is going to be badly hit or has already been hit by this COVID-19 situation, or are there any opportunities by which we can actually bounce back?
Sandeep, let me take this question. I think we are very, very badly hit. Not we, across the country, across the world, all countries are hit very, very badly. As I said in the start of the session that this is a global recession. No doubt about that. If you're talking about the unorganized sector, see, unorganized sector is totally dependent on the organized sector. They cannot work in their own actually. So if the organized sector is getting hit such as severely, unorganized sector is also hit very badly. There are a lot of numbers being announced by IMF, World Bank, and many other institutes that earlier they were projecting 1.9% growth, then 0.9% growth, then 0.2%, and today they are talking about the negative growth in India and even China. Or forget about the all other European countries where the recession will, or probably the growth will be much more in negative actually. So we all are in the severe problems, unpredictable situation. Nobody anticipated, and nature has taken the right step today, probably I can say. And it will going to take a long time to come on track. Probably even if everything will get normal, you will get vaccine tomorrow. There is a news flashing on the television that Italy claimed that they got their vaccine. Even if the vaccine is there tomorrow on your table, still, and everything will get open up, probably still it will take 9 months to 15 months to come on track. It will not happen overnight. It will not happen very soon actually. It's a big problem, and we should ready for a big battle going forward actually.
Absolutely.
Mr. Rajesh, we only left with 3 more minutes as far as live streaming time is concerned. I'm sorry, Mr. Krishna Shah, would you like to please take up your question? Mr. Krishna Shah. Mr. Krishna Shah, would you like to ask your question? Mr. Surinder Singhal, would you like to ask a question? This is the last and final call. Thank you so much. Rajesh, you could please conclude the webinar now.
Yeah. So before I conclude, I want to point out that any unanswered questions we will take up offline and we will reach out with a response. I think a lot of questions have not been answered. We will take it offline and we will reach out to you. I'd like to thank our panelists for taking out the time here today. And I will also conclude this webinar with a note of thanks to Lex Witness for setting up the platform and for FICCI who permitted us to collate observations of the manufacturing industry. I also want to thank all of you for being an excellent audience. And then definitely last but not the least, I think we should also thank our family members who let us participate in this webinar without any disturbance of any kind. So thank you all for taking the time out today. It's been an absolute pleasure.